So when the car arrives in service, we have this board that we can hook up to the door of the trailer. The first thing to do is to write at which time the car got in on the time card, let's say 12 o'clock. And if we have a 30-minute service, we'll have to get out at 12:30. And that's the target that the crew should keep, that the car will have to be out on time. The cars are now equipped with a fire suppression system. When the car comes in, the first thing to do is to put the fire pin in. So the pin is attached to this red little lanyard. You just have to push the pin in like this, a bottle, so that if any of the cable gets pulled, it won't trigger the bottle. When the car gets out of service, the pin has to be removed so that the system is live in operation. When the car gets in service, we slide the quick jack under the car. There is a bar under each car here, so we can jack anywhere. The goal is to put the front pad under the very front of the car here. So we slide the jack towards the front because those cars are heavier in the front. We have to put plywood under the jack to secure it and spread the load. If you look under the jack, there are two pads here in the front where the weight is going to be. And you have to be careful in the rear, there are 4 pads. Here I make sure that my plywood in the rear is under my 4 pads. And here in the front, I want my plywood to be basically in center of those 2 pads. Here there's an up and down. So we press the up button, that's going to raise the car. When it is at the very top, we push down the lock bar. And I press the down button to bring the jack down and secure it in place. First thing we're going to check once the car is in the air is the play in the wheel bearings, this line here. So the columns, there is front left, front right, rear left, rear right, and it's separated into the green is for Rockster, the pink is for Princess TI. So what we are looking for here, the wheels in the front, we shake them vertically like this to see if there is any play. If there's any play like this, that could come either from the suspension or the ball joint. And we check for play this way, for play in the tie rods. Here there is no play, we are fine. It could also be a play in the wheel bearing. We do the same thing in the rear, play in the lateral link or in the bearing. It's good. So we do that before we detach the wheels. Once all the wheels have been checked, I can now check the board that all these items are good. Next step is to remove the wheels. Okay, so when you remove the wheel of the car, if there is a lot of dirt inside, just drop it like this to try to evacuate most of the dirt.
There might be ice though.
And when you inspect the wheel, look inside, you see those wheels get a lot of wear from the wheel scrapers. And we want to make sure there's no major dents or things that are going to cause a leak. So that's one of the things to inspect. We don't want too much dirt between the bead and the rim that could also cause a slow leak. So here it's clean. Usually it's more on the outside that we can get gravels that get stuck. If there's any doubt, talk to the driver to inspect the tire and see if he wants to keep that or put a spare on. First 3 items are the brakes. The pads, rotor and springs, brake line, banjo and caliper bolts. We make sure the spring is still in place. The pin here is still holding on the side. We look at the wear on the pads. For the banjo bolt, we take 14 mil. We make sure the bolt is still tight, there is no leak. We follow the brake line, make sure there is no cut, there is no leak, we're good. You can check the ABS sensor too in the front. And we have to check the 2 caliper bolts. So here I take my 17 mil. It's tight, and there is one at the bottom. Here, door springs, brake line, banjo, caliper bolt. Okay, brakes in the rear, same thing. We inspect the rotor, no crack. We still have the spring. We have the locking spring here. Brake line, we clean them up, it's clean. Banjo bolt here, same thing, 14 mil. Don't go too hard, they break easy. And then we have the two caliper bolts. Okay, so the upper bolt is here. Sometimes it's easier to reach with the socket, but you can also reach with the flat one. And the bottom one is here. Next step is to check the top hat bolts. So they can be 12 or 13 mil. We make sure everything is tight. They can get loose, especially with vibration. If you over tighten it, break the studs. You can push the stud down and put a new nut and bolts in place. Okay, here same thing, 3 top hat bolts. Is a top strut bolt. So here there is a bolt at the top of the strut. We have to make sure it's tight. So when I do like this, the insert is going to spin. That means it's tight. It's fine. The front do spin, the rear do not spin. Online version. And here is the rear. Oh, this one is tight. That's good. And those two. The next items are seal savers, strut inserts, strut springs and rings, and strut lower bolts and bottom nut. That's all about the suspension. And you can do everything with a 21 mil, 22, which is 7/8, and we're going to need a 19 mil. That's all we need. So when we come here to the corner, first thing to do is pull out the seal saver. It's a Velcro. Just remove the Velcro. What we are looking for is that if there is any oil leak or any grease or any of the seals that are gone, we look for the spring. We inspect that there is no broken spring, and we take also the spanner wrench here. Put the spanner wrench here, and it shouldn't move. Oh, the two rings are tight. One thing that can happen is that the bottom here that is screwed in the black part there, this thing can slide, in which case you have to tighten it more. But usually everything stays in place. If everything is clean here, you can right away put the seal saver. Make sure you clean the inside, because that's what really protects the seals.
Yeah, because this will be covered with mud.
They have a shape. You see, do not cut. That's the bottom. The top has actually a little pinch to make it tapered at the top, so it doesn't slide on the strut. So I put that around the strut. Make sure I don't catch the brake lines inside. I start from the top and I work my way to the bottom. Once it's in place, I put the Velcro in the back and I turn it clockwise so that it goes up with the spring. We want to make sure we cover the top of the spring over there and we don't leave a gap. We have to check the tightness of those two bolts here. Okay, those two bolts. They are 22 mil, so you can take your 7/8 ratchet in there. Tighten, doesn't move, that's good. I'm gonna go to the next one. The phone in the way. And tight. So here I want to make sure this is tight. I don't go crazy because it's an aluminum thread inside, but if that gets loose, the nut falls off and the insert comes off the strut. So we have to make sure this is tight. That's the 19 mil for the bottom strut.
Okay.
So one of the things with the seal saver in the rear, there's very little clearance between the body and here. So I turn the Velcro toward the front. I don't put it in the back, otherwise they rip off and they work. So the orientation of the seal saver in the rear is basically the logo toward the back. For the nuts, the top one is like in the front. It's relatively easy to access. The bottom one, so the bottom nut here is not always easy to access with the 22 because it's going to hit at the top. So you can always use the 21 and hit the bolt on the other side. So here you can hit the 21 on the bolt if you can't access the nut. The bottom ones rarely move. The thing you have to watch though is if the nut has backed off, it could have damaged the CV axle boots. So that's something to inspect here. The CV axle boots, make sure it doesn't have any rip, and that the actually clamp that's holding the boot together, it's still on there and it didn't hit the nut. So here in the rear, same thing, we check the bottom nut. There's more room. Yeah, it's to finish the inspection in the front, we're going to do sway binding, tie rods, ball joint, control arm, fender liner all at once. Okay, first thing, the end links, we are just checking those two 15 mil boards here and here. Okay. Then tie rod, we make sure nothing is loose here, and you take the 19 mil, make sure the cutter pin is still inside the castle nut, and the castle nut shouldn't move. Same thing at the bottom here, ball joint, make sure the cutter pin is still in there. Spare ball joints are in the trailer if needed, and the nut should be tight and not moving. We also check the control arm, no damage to the control arm, and we check also the bushing. So here there's a bushing in there. You can pry against the bar and it shouldn't have much play. And the same thing, there's another bushing here. So here you can also lift. If the bar has too much play, you can come here and just make sure it's springy, but if the bushing is gone, you will hear a clunking. We shouldn't have any clunking. That's it for, and the last step is a fender liner. Make sure the fender liner is in place. There is extra protection behind in case the fender liner is gone, but we have to make sure the wiring harness behind that runs in the fender is always protected. Sway bar and links in the rear, same thing, they are aftermarket, they are 15 mil. Check that they are both tight. Rear lateral links 19 mil, trailing arm 17 mil, and we are going to do a check of the CV axle boot and nut. The nut, just put the 32 mil on the impact. So for the axle nut, just put the impact on and zap it with the impact. Shouldn't move. The subframe bolts 17 mil. We just check that they are tight. One here and one over there. There is a long bolt for the lateral links. It's this guy. Can't see him. Trailing arm, 17 mil nut here. We check that it's tight too. Okay, we're gonna do the same on the other side. And the axle boots, we check. Probably go to the rear. So axle boots here, we check both outside and inside that there is no rip. Usually when there is a rip, there's going to be a spray of grease. Only way to fix it, if we have enough time, is to change the axle. So to change the axle, you just have to remove the two nuts we checked and the bolts, so this and this. The whole thing pops out and we remove the axle nut and put the new axle in. If there is no time, we just fix it with duct tape around. Okay, we have to check that we have the 4 mud flaps. Sometimes the screws get a bit loose here. If a mud flap is missing, we have spares in the trailer. Same thing in the rear. We just have those 3 little... It's plastic insert, so don't go too hard on them. Just put the wheel back on. Gravel tires, we run 30 psi hot. So even if the pressure is at 28 and it's cold, you don't have to put them back on at 30 psi because they are going to get back to that pressure as soon as they get to 10. We want to make sure we catch slow leaks, so as soon as the pressure drops below 25, we need to put more air. If it consistently keeps to go down, we change the tire. If we are running snow tires, we run stock pressures, which is 36 in the front, 30 in the rear. Gravel, we run 30 front and rear. Okay, if you are using the electronic torque wrench to torque, to turn it on, there is a C button here. You stay pressed on it for 2 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds, it will turn on. Then to set the torque, you press set, and you can go up and down. So here I'm gonna, oops, I'm gonna try to go at 80 is fine. We are do the torque at 80. I press set. So now the torque is set. I just have to put my 70 mil. As soon as the torque wrench beeps, you can probably see the screen. It's turned red. It means it has reached the torque. That's all there is to it. Okay, we're gonna look at the section under the car. A skid plate, rear diff, the underbody protection, the exhaust part. Motor mount, that's if we have the time to remove an oil pan, that's if we have time to remove the skid plate, which usually we don't do on a short service. We only remove the skid plate on a long service. Okay, skid plates, we have 3 bolts in the front and 2 nuts in the rear. One piece of underbody protection in the front that slides under the skid plates. Everything is secured with zip ties. In the rear, we have the front that is secured with nuts and goes all the way to the back secured with zip ties. Sometimes the rear zip ties break, that's what we replace. Zip ties here. Exhaust on this side, we make sure it's still attached on the 2 rear hangers. There's an extra hanger over here that hold the cat back. There's another hanger here. And otherwise we follow the exhaust to the front. Yeah, that's all there is. We just make sure it's not pinched badly. We check the nuts here and the 2 nuts here. And those are 14, of course. I'm gonna remove it. With the skid plate out, first thing we inspect is the bottom of the oil pan, making sure there's no damage to the oil pan. The skid plate has to be cleaned. There's a piece of padding on top of the skid plate between the skid plate and the oil pan so that no gravel gets in between, but to make sure this remains clean. We can check the exhaust headers. Here there's a lot of exhaust wrap around them, so they should stay clean. The motor mounts are here on each side. There's one here. One motor mount here. Oh, slightly loose. And the same on the other side. Can you see it? Okay. Usually the top of the motor mount. Yes, never change. So the other thing we check are the exhaust header bolts, nuts. So those are those nuts here. See? Just go on the other side. Don't go too close, you don't see stuff because you are way too close. Okay, so nuts here and here. We have to make sure, and there's a third one on the inside. So the one on the outside, you can just go with the, okay, tight. This one was a bit loose. And there's one on the inside, you can come on this side there to see the one on the inside. Okay, one on the inside. Okay, so to get the inside nut on the exhaust header, it's easier if you use the swivel here. That allows you to get the right angle to get to it. We inspect the rear diff. We look for leaks at the axle seals on each side. We make sure the rear sensor is still connected. There is no leak at the back, no crack in the casing. The last place where there could be a leak, which you have to kind of look through the skid plate, is the front of the diff. Make sure there is no leak at the shaft in the front. And we make sure the skid plate is still here in place. So here you can see the mini skid plate, it's already covered by the underbody protection. So there's like a double protection on the rear diff. So to put the skid plate back on, much easier if you have a stud like this sticking out, to put that in first. So, I can't see anything. Then I put the nut, the rear hold in place. Then you take one of the front bolts and you put the center one first. So here I have my center bolt. It's in place. Once the center bolt is started, you can put one of the edge ones and finish with the other side. So this is the torque of the Milwaukee is enough. I go when it stops and do a quarter turn, and that's it. Okay, to get the car off the quick jack, you have to go up first. So press up. That's what it is. The locking arms from the tabs, and then you press the down button. Sometimes you need some help at the end, especially when it's cold, to go down, so you can push with your foot to have them all the way down, and then you can slide it out. So inspection of the fluids, always take a clean paper towel, start with the oil. Coolant, we look at the amount of coolant left in the bowl here, make sure it's at the top of the mark. You can inspect the battery, make sure the battery is not loose and the connector are still tight. Windshield wiper fluid here, we have to make sure, especially on winter events, bad weather events, that we are at least half full. Brake fluid here, always at the top and clean. Clutch fluid is really very hard to see in the back. Never had issues with it, but the ball is hidden behind the intercooler. There's a slight angle where you can see it by shaking the car, but very, very hard to see. It's down there. We can't see it with the camera. That's fine. Transmission fluid, so power steering fluid first here. You can see the ball is here. We are at this min and max hot and cold. The dipstick for the transmission fluid, you have to reach, it's behind here, down, and you can see the top of the dipstick maybe. Other things we inspect in the engine bay, the fuel lines here, making sure there is no leak anywhere. Those are on the Frogster, they run above. On Princess TI, they are stock, they run under. We inspect the belts, making sure the tension is okay and there is no damage to the belt. Princess also has air conditioning with the belt for the air conditioning. We check the air oil separator hoses there, making sure they are all tight. So air oil separator hoses, we make sure the air oil separator holds in place and everything, there are no leaks around. We make sure the hoses for the intercooler are tight. So there is this guy here to the throttle body, and this other little guy here.
Where?
The air oil separator, there is not much room. So these hoses are the main ones to check. Air filter, just a 10 mil. You open, and you can check that the sock is still there, air filter is clean. So when they are going to inspect the turbo restrictor at tech, we need to remove this hose so that they can get their gauge and their camera in there. So to remove this, first remove the cone filter. So just go there, unscrew this, and you remove the filter with a rotation toward the top or the bottom, whichever comes first. Usually the top works better, like this, so that you don't crush the cone. Put that away. Next step is you loosen those two clamps. The first step is to take this side, slide it in like this, and so you bend it on this side, and then you can remove the hose here. Now they can go inside with the camera. So here I'm just putting the inspection camera inside the inlet hose to make sure the restrictor is in place. So here you can see the restrictor in front of the turbo. There I'm backing up. And so the way the restrictor holds to the turbo, it's press fitted, and there is a piece of a tape around that it's foil tape, high temp foil tape around that secures it in place to the turbo. And then the inlet hose comes around. If they want to put a seal, a car seal, there is a worm clamp just here. You have to see the end of my finger. I'll take the screwdriver. See this clamp here? This little guy come more on top. This little guy there. Mm-hmm. They can put a seal around that one. There is no way we can get to the restrictor without removing this. So they can seal this if they want. So this is what restrictor gauges look like. Here I have a 32 and 34. I don't have a 36, but basically what they would do is take the gauge, put it in until it reaches the restrictor at the end. So for example, here I have a 34 mm restrictor. When the gauge comes in, it will go like this, and they will try to turn the restrictor gauge like this to make sure it's not oval and trying to cheat. So they go like this, making sure the gauge cannot go through, and usually they have a camera behind. And if it doesn't go through, you are good to go. Okay, to put the hose back in place, same thing, we do opposite of what we did. So we can put this side in and then the other one in, and we push from the inside to make sure everything is secure in place. Have to make sure the clamp is in place, the hoses are in place. If we have any leak here, the car is not going to run properly, and well, most likely going to run lean. So it's important to put those hoses properly and the clamp over them. This one here. The second clamp can be a bit tricky. There is very little room to get in there with a fuel line, but you want to make sure that's pushed as far as possible in. So here to put the cone back in, and make sure the sock is just at the edge over the clamp, not behind you. I don't want the sock to be stuck in there. Then same thing, I start from the top and I rotate down just like this, and then I just have to tighten the hose clamp. When I'm in place, just have to put the sock back all around. Close the box with my 10mm. Same thing, it's a tiny nut set here, so don't go crazy. As soon as it stops, it's done. Okay, when you close the hood, always be careful and go slow. If one of the pins from the hood pins is not straight, you can just bend it to readjust it. Sometimes leaning over, they can bend a bit. Don't slam the hood down, because if the pin is not aligned, that will damage the top section here and have a hard time closing after that. Just put down, slide the pin down and lock it in place. Then you can check that the hood pins are checked. Another thing to check out is the light bar. Does it work like this? Yeah. So the light bar on Frogster, just press LED and the light should turn on. You can look outside, light is on. Okay. And that's it. I don't have any fog lights anymore, so just the light bar to make sure it works. For night stages, we also want to make sure the co-driver light is working. On Frogster, the co-driver light is here on this side. Probably need the accessories on. Yep. Okay, so this button, and you can see the lights. Actually, no, it's not this one. this guy? Yeah, it's this guy. Second one here is this. The first one is just all the lights. So we just want to make sure those are working. And these ones are the lights on the driver's side, which I have to fix. The wiring for the Easy Track is actually running here above the intake. It comes directly from the battery. So there is, if you follow the wire, there is one connected directly to the positive, the other one is on the kill switch, and there's a fuse here in line. So if there's a problem, you can blow from here. There's another fuse here, and if the fuse blows, there's an extra fuse in here. And then it runs from here into the firewall. But that's the, there's another connector here, it's taped. So you can check if you have juice here before to see if there is juice inside, if there is any problem with it. That's it. On the tool cart, we have the impact here. All the half-inch sockets are here. All the 3/8 and 1/4-inch sockets, ratchets are here. We have all the pliers in here. Here, box cutters and pens, punches. Here we have all the screwdrivers here. We have all the flat wrenches, ratcheting ones here, and regular ones here. And here you have to turn a quarter turn to open ratchets. And there are a few pickup tools and magnets if you lose something. At the bottom of the cart, we have a little compressor. We have all the brushes, scrapers, hammers, etc. C-clamps. At the bottom here, we have an extra set of flat wrenches, all the sizes, and there are also crowfoot wrenches in there. All the zip ties, zip tie tool, safety wire, pop rivets are in here. And at the bottom, hopefully you won't need it, all the time set, helicoils, and there is a drill bits and a drill in there. We have hose clamp pliers in here, and we have all the plastic plier tools here. Plastic trim tools look like this. And the hose clamp pliers tool look like this. So there's a pick for the hoses and pliers for any kind of clamp, and separating hoses here. So in the stack of rigid boxes, at the top, the most useful stuff is probably going to be the boroscope here in the center. There's also OBD2 tool, tire pressure gauge, a battery tester tool, a caliper, a battery booster, and a sound meter. So to unstack the box, just unclip on the side. Just unclip on both sides, and the box comes off. Next box down. Here there is a fuel pump for the gas can. There is a big half-inch Milwaukee impact. There is a big hammer, and there is other big tools that don't fit, like big pliers and plier bars. Last box at the bottom is unlatched on both sides, here and here, and inside we have all the Ryobi tools, plastic cutter, grinder, roto disc. We have two different kinds of sawzalls, and there is an extra drill in there, and all the spare grinding disc and parts for those. Okay, so on the wall control, the spare parts, we have suspension spares, we have control arms, we have tie rod and links, thready arm, adjustable lateral links, spare air filter, shifter linkage assembly, spare belts, front and rear CV axles, full set of spare brakes, front and rear, left and right, and the spare rotor, front and rear. Here we have the LED lights, the gazebo. On top here we have a full spare radiator with fan. We have spare LED bar in the back. Inside the cabinet here we have the winch at the bottom. We have spare coolant, spare turbo, turbo hoses, spare parent, steering and alternator, hardware for belts, spare jack stands, battery to operate the winch, or any electrical pump, compressor that works on 110, all the extra spare belts, more jack stands. Here the hoses for the compressor and the air pressure, vacuum cleaner. In this box here we have all the small things, grommet pins, all the glues, light bulbs, electrical connectors, gasket maker, etc. Spare fire extinguishers. Here we have a plastic welder, all the hose clamps, all the spare spark plugs, thermostat, auto sensor, coil packs are in there. In the back we have a bolt buster, we have a weave nut kit, and here there is all the AN fittings for fuel lines. In the front here, this box has all stuff to make brake lines, repair brakes, change brake pads. The new brake pads are in here. The kick for the quick jack, 30 gallon of gas in the gas caddy here, the generator. We have a power washer. In the big drawer at the top we have the inner tie rod removal sets to change the tie rod. We have the Dremel big cutters, a set of toe plates. If someone locks their keys in their car, we have the door opener kit with the pump thingy. We have a set of go through sockets, big drill bit, big sets of sockets, and we have the tap and die set here. So in here we have the 4 knuckles, 2 fronts, 2 rear, and we have a spare oil pan. We have most of spare nuts and bolts in here. We have spare spark plugs and a plastic clip here, some bushings, all the electrical stuff in the next drawer. At the bottom we have all the extra ball joints, extra end links, and we have a clutch master sleeve in here and some extra calipers as well. There is an extra starter, a vise, top mounts, motor mounts, an extra gas pedal assembly in this door. Generator, just turn to start it and press the start button. It has an eco mode that you can turn on if needed. A top is required to be under cars at all time in service. In the fluid box we have all the fluids we may need, from coolant to oil and various brake fluid and stuff, and all the funnels. There is a kit here to bleed the coolant, and there is a 12 volt pump to pump oil or any other fluids. In box 3 at the bottom, that's where we have all the spare hoses, spare fuel lines, spare intake hose. We have the mud flaps. There is all the wrench, the radiator hoses, basically all the hoses you can find. There is also the extra fuel pumps in there, and all the miscellaneous hardware. So we also have the extra seal savers in here, and all the extra gaskets. We also have an extra timing belt just in case it was damaged to one.